My day doesn't start with an alarm clock, but with a thin sliver of gray dawn light slicing through a gap in the bedroom curtains. At 68, sleep is a delicate, web-like thing, easily disturbed and rarely deep. But I don't complain. These morning hours are mine. The house, where Robert and I lived for 42 years, sleeps with me, its quiet breath the steady hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant whisper of wind in the branches of the old oak tree in the backyard. I make my way downstairs, my hand on the smooth, time-polished banister. Every step is familiar, every creaking floorboard a note in a long memorized melody. In the kitchen, my ritual awaits. A cup of strong, black coffee from the old drip machine and a fresh copy of the Wall Street Journal, which the delivery person leaves on my porch at 5:45 a.m. sharp. I love the rustle of the pages, the smell of ink relics from a bygone era that I stubbornly refuse to let go. My son, Michael, laughs and calls it analog nostalgia. He says all the financial news is already 10 hours old, reflected in the Tokyo and London markets. He's probably right, but for me, it's not just news. It's an anchor. It's a sense of order in a world that seems to grow more chaotic by the day. My home is my fortress, my archive. I was a financial analyst for a major corporation for nearly 40 years, and the habit of systematizing is etched into my DNA. My economics and market history books are arranged in perfect order. My bills are filed away by quarter, and the photos on the living room shelves stand in chronological procession. Robert and me at our wedding, the birth of Michael, then Sarah. Their first steps, graduations, weddings, and finally, the arrival of my grandchildren, Emily and Jake. After Robert passed away 5 years ago, this order became my lifeline. It keeps the walls from closing in, the silence from becoming deafening. I water his ficus trees, prune the roses he planted, and talk to his photograph on the mantelpiece. He still smiles back at me with that same warm, slightly weary smile. Sometimes I feel like I can still sense his presence, his calm certainty that was always my foundation. My main project in recent years has been the family history. Not just a genealogical tree with dates of birth and death, but a true chronicle, bound in thick leather, filled with stories I've gathered piece by piece. This is my legacy, my gift to my grandchildren. I want them to know who their ancestors were, not just names on paper, but living people with their own dreams, fears, and triumphs. Today is Saturday, which means it's time for the weekly video call with Sarah's family. I settle into the chair in my study, adjust the webcam, and click the call button. The screen fills with faces. My daughter, Sarah, looking a little tired as usual, and my grandchildren, 10-year-old Emily and 8-year-old Jake, already engrossed in their tablets. Hello, my darlings, I say, trying to pour as much warmth as I can into my voice. Hi, Grandma, they mumble in unison, their eyes glued to their screens. I take a deep breath. I found something amazing for our book. It turns out your great-great-great-grandfather, Arthur Grant, started a small cooperative bank during the Great Depression to help local farmers. I found his entry in the county registrar's office. Can you imagine? I hold the printed document up to the camera. For a moment, Jake looks up. Cool, he says, and immediately returns to his game. Emily doesn't even react. Sarah notices my fallen expression. Mom, that's really interesting, it is, she says placatingly. But they're just at that age. You know, the gadgets. Besides, they have homework to do. We'll call you tomorrow, okay? Of course, sweetie. Of course, I reply, forcing a smile. The call ends. I'm left sitting in the silence. Every time I try to share something important with them, I hit this wall of polite indifference. They love me, I know they do. But they don't see the value in the things I value. And every one of these conversations leaves a small but sharp splinter in my heart. Sunday dinner is a tradition. I make my mother's recipe for roasted chicken and my signature apple pie. Michael arrives with his wife and son, and Sarah with her family. The conversation, as usual, revolves around work, school, and the latest Netflix series. By the way, Mom, Michael says suddenly, pushing his empty plate away. I got a notification that you're late on the cable bill. I told you, let me set up autopay for you. I freeze, my fork halfway to my mouth. That can't be right. I paid it last week. Michael chuckles. Well, you must have forgotten to mail it. It's no big deal. It's just, at your age, it's hard to keep track of everything. We just want to help. I'm not senile, Michael, I say, trying to keep my voice from trembling. Nobody's saying that, Sarah chimes in. We're all just worried. Just let us help you with this, Mom, Michael finishes. It'll be one less thing for you to worry about. I don't answer, just nod silently. They look at me and see an incompetent old woman. They don't see the woman who analyzed financial markets and managed multi-million-dollar portfolios for 40 years. They only see the number on my driver's license. And that phrase, "we just want to help," sounds like the beginning of a sentence. My morning starts with a handful of pills. One for high blood pressure, small and blue. Another for cholesterol. I carefully arrange them in my pill organizer. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, everything under control. A few weeks ago, after taking my pills, I felt strange. The room swam. I chalked it up to the weather. But a few days later, it happened again. The same light but persistent dizziness. Sarah, noticing my pallor, grew concerned. Mom, are you okay? Maybe someone should start checking in on you every day. I'm fine, sweetie, I assured her. I didn't want to tell her about the dizzy spells. I knew it would just add fuel to their fire of concern. It would become another symptom. So I kept quiet, but a seed of anxiety had been planted. The real blow came last Tuesday. In the mail, I found a bright red envelope. A final notice from the county tax office. According to the letter, I was delinquent on my property taxes. This couldn't be happening. Property taxes are sacred. I rushed to my study. My hands were trembling. The Taxes 2025 folder was empty. I dumped the entire contents of the drawer onto the floor. Nothing. Panic rose in my throat. I remember writing the check, or do I? In desperation, I called Michael. He listened with an unnerving calm. Mom, calm down. You probably just forgot. It's serious, but it's fixable. Give me your online banking login and I'll pay it. Shame burned me. I recited my password. See? All taken care of, he said cheerfully. But Mom, we have to admit, this is a major slip-up. Please think about giving me and Sarah power of attorney over your finances. It's for your own good. I mumbled something and hung up. Maybe he was right. Maybe I really was losing my grip. For the first time in my life, I was truly afraid of myself. Sarah came over the next day, officially to help me tidy up. She treated me as if I were made of glass. At one point, she stepped into the hall to take a call. I was sure it was Michael. The door was ajar. She's a complete mess, Michael. Yes, I found it. It was tucked inside a gardening book. Can you believe it? She doesn't even remember where she put it. A pause. I froze. What bill? Yeah, I know. The tax bill was the last straw. We can't wait any longer. I'll talk to her tonight. Gently. We have to act before she does something she can't undo. Yes, for her own good. My blood ran cold. The tax bill. She'd found it. But why did she tell Michael I'd lost it? This wasn't just a conversation between concerned children. This was a conspiracy. They were lying. The phrase, for her own good, no longer sounded like care. It sounded like a threat. In that moment, I knew I was in danger, and the danger was coming from my own children. A week passed. A week of their feigned concern and my own chilling vigilance. I played the part of the confused old woman. But inside, I was wound as tight as a watch spring. On Sunday evening, I sat down to refill my pill organizer. I opened the bottle for my blood pressure medication, small, octagonal, pale blue pills. I poured a few into my palm, and I froze. Something was wrong. The color was different, a little duller, and the shape, they weren't octagonal. They were round. My breath caught. These were not my pills. My mind, which my children believed was failing, began to work with incredible speed. I rushed to my study and found the pharmacy receipt. Lisinopril, 10 milligrams. I typed the name into a search engine. Images appeared on the screen. Octagonal. Blue. My pills. Then what were these? I looked at the bottle again. The label was correct. Everything was in its place. Except for the contents. the dizziness, the inability to focus. It had all started a few weeks ago, around the same time Michael first mentioned I needed help. Click. It was a feeling in my head. The lost pill, the whisper in the hall, and now this, the switched medication. This was something sinister. They weren't just waiting for me to become helpless. They were actively making me helpless. I sat in the deafening silence, staring at the small, round pills. They were proof of a betrayal so monstrous my mind refused to believe it. They called me forgetful, but I hadn't forgotten a thing. I remembered everything. And in that moment, I knew the fight for my home, for my money, and for my mind had just begun. I didn't sleep all night. I sat in my armchair in the dark living room, the small, round pills resting on a saucer on the coffee table like sinister pearls in the moonlight. The shock had passed, leaving behind an icy, ringing calm. The rage that should have been boiling inside me had cooled into a focused, concentrated energy. The panic that should have been choking me gave way to crystalline clarity. For 40 years, I had analyzed market trends, identified anomalies in data streams, and predicted risk. Now, the subject of my analysis was my own family. I picked up one of the counterfeit pills and closed it in my fist. This was Exhibit A. I went to the kitchen, found a small zip-top bag, and carefully placed all the round pills inside. I hid the bag at the very bottom of the flour canister in the back of the pantry. Then I took the original prescription bottle, emptied it of its remaining dust, and hid it as well. Tomorrow morning, I would say it was empty and ask Michael to pick up the refill. I had to see what he would do. As dawn broke, I went upstairs and looked at myself in the mirror. The same woman as yesterday, but my eyes were different. The confusion was gone. In its place was steel. I knew that from this moment on, every step, every word, every breath had to be part of a performance. I had to become the weak, forgetful Catherine they were creating. To win this game, I had to let them think they were winning. After my morning coffee, during which I pretended to take a pill, swallowing a tiny breadcrumb, I sat down at my desk. My mind, accustomed to structure and planning, kicked into high gear. I took a clean sheet of paper and drew a line down the middle. On the left, I wrote, their objective. On the right, my objective. Under their objective, I listed, obtain guardianship. Gain control of finances, house, savings, investments. Achieve this by proving my mental incompetence. Methods, gaslighting, manipulation, medication tampering. Under my objective, I wrote, gather irrefutable proof of their actions. Protect my assets and my independence. Hold them accountable. Do it without them knowing until the very end. This was my new project, the most important one of my life. I was no longer a mother mourning the betrayal of her children. I was an analyst facing a hostile takeover, and I was going to defend my company, my life, with every tool at my disposal. The first rule of risk analysis: never act on assumptions alone. You need data. Hard, objective, undeniable data. My word against theirs was worthless. I needed a witness that couldn't lie. Technology would be my witness. I spent hours online, researching something I'd previously only read about in spy novels: miniature hidden cameras. The market was vast. Cameras disguised as phone chargers, smoke detectors, digital clocks, even pens. My research skills honed over decades served me well. I read reviews, compared specs, battery life, video quality, viewing angle, motion detection, and the ability to record to the cloud. I settled on 3 devices. The first was a USB wall adapter, perfect for the kitchen outlet with a clear view of the table where I kept my pill organizer. The second was a digital clock for my study, which I could place on a bookshelf to cover my desk and the doorway. The third, and most cunning, was a non-functional smoke detector with a built-in camera. I planned to install it in the upstairs hallway with a view of all the bedroom doors. I ordered them for next-day delivery, paying with my credit card. It was my first proactive step, and it brought me a grim satisfaction. I could feel the control they had tried to strip from me slowly returning to my hands. I was no longer a passive victim. I was setting up a game board my opponents didn't even know existed. The package arrived midday while I was home alone. My heart pounded as I unpacked the small boxes. The devices were smaller than I'd expected. The instructions were in tiny print, but armed with my reading glasses and a magnifying glass, I sat down and methodically, step by step, set them up. Connecting them to my home's Wi-Fi, creating a cloud storage account, setting up motion-activated alerts on an old iPad I rarely used. It took me nearly 3 hours. Installation was the hardest part. I felt like a spy in my own home. Plugging the adapter into the kitchen wall, I made sure the tiny green recording light was barely visible. The clock in the study fit perfectly on the shelf, as if it had always been there. The smoke detector was the real challenge. I had to get on a stepladder, my hands shaking as I unscrewed the old one and mounted the new. My heart hammered against my ribs. When it was all done, I sat in my armchair and opened the app on my iPad. 3 small windows showed me my home from 3 different angles. The kitchen, the study, the hallway. It was a strange, alienating feeling seeing my sanctuary turned into a soundstage. But it was a necessary measure. Now my house was watching. And waiting. The following days became an agonizing performance. I had to be weak to remain strong. I'd forget where I left my glasses and ask Sarah to help me find them. I'd accidentally call Jake by his father's name and then apologize profusely. I asked Michael to double-check if I'd turned off the stove, knowing full well I had. Each instance was a small torture. Part of me wanted to scream in their faces, "I know what you're doing. I'm not crazy." But the analyst inside me whispered, "Patience. Gather the data. Don't spook them." They took the bait. I could see the mixture of pity and triumph in their eyes. They exchanged knowing glances behind my back, confident their plan was working perfectly. "Mom, maybe I should start picking up your mail for you, so you don't have to worry about bills," Sarah suggested one day. "Oh, sweetie, that would be such a help," I replied in the friendliest voice I could manage, while my insides coiled with rage. They started dropping by unannounced, just to check in. They rummaged through my closets under the guise of cleaning, rearranged things in my study to make it more convenient. And every time they left, I would rush to my iPad to review the footage. For a week, I saw nothing incriminating. Just their fussing, their condescending smiles, their performative care. I began to doubt myself. Was I wrong? Was I going mad, imagining all of this? Then, on Thursday afternoon, the camera in the study detected motion. The recording showed Sarah. She'd come by while I was out at the senior center for an art history lecture. She had told me she was just dropping off some papers. The video showed her walk into the study. She glanced around. Then she walked to my desk. She didn't drop off any papers. Instead, she picked up the small stack of outgoing mail I'd left. She quickly sorted through it. One of the envelopes was the bill for my homeowner's insurance. She looked at it, then glanced toward the clock on the shelf, a fleeting smirk on her face. She didn't put it back. She slipped it into her purse. And then she left. I watched the short clip over and over. My hands went cold. There it was. Irrefutable proof. This wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate, cold-blooded act designed to ensure that in a few weeks, I would receive another final notice and suffer another blow to my self-confidence. I felt no triumph, only an icy void. This was worse than I had imagined. This wasn't just greed. It was cruelty. I saved the video file to a separate, password-protected folder. Exhibit B. My compliance and growing helplessness made them bolder. The following Sunday, after dinner, they stayed after the grandchildren had left. Michael and Sarah sat me down in the living room. Their faces were grave and concerned. It felt like an intervention. "Mom, we need to talk," Michael began. "Sarah and I are very worried. The missed bills, your forgetfulness. We don't think we can risk it anymore." "We spoke to a lawyer," Sarah added, her voice soft and cloying. "He advised us to get power of attorney. It's just a formality, so we can manage your affairs, pay your bills, talk to your doctors. So you can relax and not have to worry about a thing." I looked at their faces, at this rehearsed concern, and felt a wave of contempt wash over me. "And there's more," Michael continued, avoiding my eyes. "We think you should have a full medical workup, including a cognitive assessment, just to make sure everything's okay. Dr. Miller can make the referral." There it was. The final play. They were no longer suggesting. They were demanding. The power of attorney would give them control of my money, and an unsatisfactory cognitive assessment would be their ticket to full guardianship. They had me cornered, or so they thought. I sat before them, feigning confusion and fear. I nodded slowly. I'll have to think about it, I stammered. Of course, Mom. You think about it, Sarah said, getting up to hug me. Her embrace felt as cold as a snake's skin. After they left, I sat in the silence for a long time. I had the recording of the stolen bill. I had the counterfeit pills. But was it enough to fight a doctor's assessment and legal pressure? Probably not. A judge might see it as a simple family dispute. I needed something more. Something that would prove their malicious intent beyond any doubt. Something that would reveal their true motive. I went to my desk and turned on the computer. I opened my online banking portal and began to review the statements for my accounts going back 6 months. Then I opened the accounts for my investment portfolio. Decades of experience had taught me to see what was hidden between the lines, to spot the small anomalies that pointed to big problems. And as I stared at the numbers, a new, much riskier plan began to form in my mind. They thought they were trapping a frail old woman. They didn't realize they were dealing with an auditor who was about to conduct the most thorough investigation of their lives. An audit of their accounts, their lies, and their souls. Even when it felt like all was lost, I didn't give up. I was just beginning my real work. Night after night, I sat at my computer, the monitor's glow casting cold reflections on my face. I immersed myself in the world of numbers, a world I had always understood and commanded. I wasn't just reviewing my bank statements. I was conducting a full forensic audit of my own life for the past 2 years. I exported data into spreadsheets, built charts, and searched for deviations from the norm. At first, everything looked pristine. My pension deposits, dividends, expenses, it all followed a predictable pattern. But I knew the devil was in the details. I started looking at the small things, not the large transactions. And I found it. In a joint savings account I had opened with Michael years ago for emergencies, I discovered a series of small but regular cash withdrawals. $200, $300 at a time. They were spaced out to avoid raising flags, always from ATMs far from his home or office. Over 18 months, it added up to nearly $20,000. That was just the beginning. The real horror came when I checked the line of credit attached to my brokerage account. It was a line, Robert, and I had never touched. It was merely a safety net. It turned out that 3 months ago, a massive sum had been drawn against it, $150,000. The signature on the documents, which I requested electronically from the bank, was mine. Or rather, a very skillful forgery. I remembered the day Sarah had brought over a few papers from the insurance company to sign, shuffling them quickly in front of me while I was distracted by the grandchildren. $150,000 plus 20, $170,000. This was no longer about a simple desire to help me with my finances. This was desperation. My son, Michael, whom I had always seen as successful and responsible, was in serious trouble. And instead of asking for help, he had chosen to steal, manipulating his sister and slowly poisoning his own mother. The motive was now clear. They didn't just need control. They needed to cover up a crime already committed and gain access to the rest of my assets to plug a hole that I suspected was much, much larger than $170,000. The pain of betrayal was now mixed with the cold fury of an analyst who had just uncovered massive fraud. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I was up against my children, their lawyer, and possibly a compromised doctor. I needed someone in my corner, someone I could trust implicitly. And I thought of Arthur Vance. Arthur was an old friend and colleague of Robert's, a semi-retired corporate litigation attorney. An old-school lawyer with a razor-sharp mind and a reputation as a bulldog who never let go. Finding his number was easy. I called him, my voice trembling as I said, "Arthur, it's Catherine Grant, Robert's wife. We need to talk. It's urgent and confidential." We met the next day in a quiet cafe downtown. I brought everything, the baggie of counterfeit pills, the flash drive with the video files, and the printouts of my financial audit. I spoke, and he listened in silence, his weathered face growing darker by the minute. He didn't interrupt, only occasionally jotting a note in his pocketbook. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, staring out the window. Then he turned to me, and in his eyes I saw not pity, but a cold fury. He struggled for the word vultures. Catherine, what they're doing isn't just a family dispute. This is criminal. We're looking at multiple felonies, from fraud to reckless endangerment. We're not just going to defend. We're going to attack. For the first time in weeks, I felt I wasn't alone. I had an ally. We sat in that cafe for another 2 hours, mapping out a strategy. Arthur was methodical, precise, and ruthless in his planning. He was exactly who I needed. They want a cognitive test? Fine, Arthur said, tapping his pen on the table. We'll give them a test, but we'll play our own game. Michael and Sarah had already scheduled an appointment for me with Dr. Miller for the following week. I feigned compliance and agreed, but Arthur moved quickly. Through his own network, he arranged for me to see one of the top neurologists in the state, a Dr. Anya Sharma, known for her independence and integrity. The appointment was for the same day as my visit to Dr. Miller, but 3 hours earlier. Dr. Sharma's examination was exhaustive. Memory tests, logic puzzles, reaction speeds. I answered everything honestly and calmly. She didn't know the full story, only that I required an independent evaluation for a family legal matter. Her conclusion, typed up on official letterhead, was unequivocal. Mrs. Grant's cognitive functions are consistent with, and in some areas exceed, the norms for her age group. No signs of dementia or other neurodegenerative disorders were found. It was my ace in the hole. 3 hours later, I was sitting in Dr. Miller's office. He was a fussy man with shifty eyes and a practiced air of friendliness. During his test, I intentionally made mistakes. I forgot one of the 3 words he asked me to remember. I hesitated on a simple arithmetic problem. I was playing the part they had written for me, and I watched with grim satisfaction as he made his notes. He already knew what diagnosis he was supposed to find. The day before the doctor's appointments, the thing I had secretly hoped for and feared most happened. Michael stopped by in the evening. He brought the new bottle of my blood pressure medication that I had asked him to pick up from the pharmacy. "Here you go, Mom," he said, placing the paper bag on the kitchen counter. "Don't forget to take it in the morning." I thanked him, and he left. I waited 10 minutes, then rushed to my iPad. The camera in the kitchen adapter had recorded everything. There was Michael, placing the bag on the counter. He glanced at the door. His movements were quick and precise. He pulled a small plastic baggie from his pocket, the one with the round pills. He opened the new bottle of real lisinopril he had just picked up from the pharmacy. He tipped its contents, my real, octagonal pills, into his pocket. Then he poured the counterfeit pills into the bottle. He screwed the cap on, shook it, and placed it prominently on the counter. But that wasn't all. The camera also recorded the audio. He pulled out his phone and whispered into it, "Sarah? Yeah, it's me. It's done. After the appointment with Miller tomorrow, she won't have a leg to stand on. He'll confirm she's completely out of it. The lawyer said with the doctor's note, the guardianship hearing will be a slam dunk." I watched the screen, the air knocked out of my lungs. This wasn't just a smoking gun. This was a signed confession. A cold, premeditated crime caught on tape. I saved the file. I now had everything I needed. I agreed to sign the power of attorney. I told Michael and Sarah they were right, that I was too tired to fight anymore. I suggested we meet on Friday to get it all done. I found a good notary someone recommended. I told them over the phone. His office is downtown, very convenient. The notary was Arthur Vance. They arrived at his office on the 15th floor of a skyscraper overlooking the city. They were in high spirits, almost celebratory. Their lawyer, a smug young man in an expensive suit, was with them. Michael and Sarah hugged me, their embraces full of false concern. We sat at the long, polished wood table in the conference room. Their lawyer placed a thick stack of documents in front of me. "Here you are, Mrs. Grant. Just sign here, here, and here." I picked up the pen. I looked at my children, at their greedy, expectant faces. Then I looked at Arthur, who sat at the head of the table. He gave me the slightest of nods. I put the pen down. "You know," I said, my voice quiet but firm, echoing in the silent room. "Before I sign my life away, I think we should all watch a few short videos. A little family home movie, you might say." Confusion flickered across Michael's and Sarah's faces. Arthur pressed a button on a remote. The large plasma screen on the wall came to life. The first video, Sarah in my study, glancing around before slipping the insurance bill into her purse. The color drained from Sarah's face. The second video, Michael in my kitchen, methodically switching the contents of the prescription bottle. His hushed whisper into the phone was perfectly clear through the speakers. "She won't have a leg to stand on." Michael shot to his feet, his face a mask of horror. "What is this? What is this?" "This is illegal," their lawyer sputtered. "And this," Arthur continued, his voice like ice, "is an independent medical evaluation from Dr. Sharma, confirming my client's perfect mental health. And this," he tossed a folder onto the table, "is a preliminary report on $170,000 in unauthorized withdrawals from her accounts." And finally, he pulled a small baggie from his briefcase. "These are samples of the pills you've been giving your mother. They've already been sent to a lab for analysis. I'm sure the police will be very interested in the results." A deafening silence fell over the room. Sarah burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. Michael collapsed back into his chair, staring into space. Their smug lawyer looked like he was going to be sick. The game was over. I had won. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Their lawyer, realizing his clients were on the verge of criminal prosecution, immediately advised them to cooperate fully and without condition. Arthur laid out my terms. It was not a negotiation. It was an ultimatum. First, immediate repayment of all stolen funds. Michael had to sell his house and his car to cover the debt. Second, they would both sign a legally binding document relinquishing any and all future claims to my estate or property. Third, a restraining order. They were not to come within 500 feet of me or my home. Contact with the grandchildren would be at my sole discretion and in the presence of a third party. Fourth, I would not press criminal charges. This was my hardest decision. I didn't do it for them. I did it for Emily and Jake. I didn't want them to one day see their parents in prison uniforms. They signed everything without reading. Their defeat was absolute. I walked out of Arthur's office that day, leaving the ruins of my former family behind me. I felt no joy, no triumph. Only a vast, crushing weariness and a profound sorrow. 6 months passed. Life settled into a new, quiet rhythm. The silence in my house was no longer deafening. It was peaceful. I started volunteering at the local senior center, helping others with financial literacy. I was preparing for my first public talk, a seminar on how to recognize the red flags of financial and emotional abuse within the family. I no longer tried to pass my legacy on to my grandchildren. I realized my true legacy was my own resilience, my own example. I knew that one day, when they were older, they would learn the whole truth, and then they could make their own choices. One evening, Arthur called. His voice was unusually excited. "Catherine, are you sitting down?" he asked. I was just finishing up the last of Michael's financial mess to close the sale on his house. "And I figured out where your $150,000 went." "Where?" I asked without much interest. "He invested it in some tech company, a startup called Innovate Dynamics." I looked them up. The founders were arrested by the FBI this morning. It was a classic Ponzi scheme, the biggest one in 5 years. It collapsed and every investor was wiped out. I was silent, trying to process his words. "Catherine, do you understand what that means?" Arthur continued. "If their plan had succeeded, if Michael had gained control of all your assets, he would have poured everything into that scheme. He was obsessed with making a quick score to get himself out of trouble. You would have lost everything. The house, your savings, everything you and Robert built. Their greed and betrayal forced you to act. And your actions, your investigation, it saved you from total financial ruin." I hung up the phone and walked to the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. I thought about the profound irony of it all. In their quest to take everything from me, my children had inadvertently forced me to save myself from a catastrophe I never even saw coming. I looked at the notes for my lecture tomorrow. I was no longer just a victim telling her story. I was a survivor. I was an analyst who had conducted the most important audit of her life. And I was a woman who had learned that true value isn't something that can be inherited or stolen. It's what's inside, the clarity of mind and the strength of spirit that no one can ever take away from you. They had called me forgetful, but now I knew this was a lesson I would remember forever.